We've all been there, right? That sudden, involuntary hiccup. We usually just laugh it off as a funny little annoyance. But have you ever really stopped to think about what's going on inside your body? Well, it turns out the science behind it is way more complex, and sometimes a lot more serious than you'd think. So let's dig in and solve the mystery of the hiccup.
To really get a sense of how serious this can be, let me tell you a quick true story. Back in 1922, there was this farmer in Iowa. One day, he's just going about his business, and he gets a case of the hiccups.
And then he just didn't stop. For 68 years. No, you heard that right. It wasn't just some funny party trick. It completely took over his life, stumped doctors, and landed him in the record books.
Okay, now obviously a 68-year-long case of hiccups is incredibly rare. But it's a huge, powerful reminder that long-term, or what doctors call intractable hiccups, are a very real and sometimes debilitating medical problem. This is way more than just eating your lunch too fast.
And get this isn't just some 1 in a billion fluke. In just a single year, about 4,000 people in the US were actually hospitalized for their hiccups. That's thousands of people whose simple hic turned into a full-blown medical crisis.
So what in the world is this thing? This reflex that can be so powerful and relentless? Let's actually break down the anatomy of a hiccup. The best way to think about it is like a neurological glitch, a little short circuit in your body's wiring. Of course, it has a fancy scientific name, singultus. And where that word comes from is actually kind of fascinating. It's from a Latin word that means to catch your breath while you're sobbing, which, if you think about it, is a pretty perfect description of that sharp, sudden gasp of air. So every single hiccup is basically a 3-part chain reaction. First, a bundle of nerves, the afferent limb, gets irritated and sends a trigger signal zipping off to your brain. That signal hits a sort of hiccup control center in your brainstem, and then bam! The efferent limb fires back a command that makes your diaphragm spasm and your vocal cords snap shut. That sudden closing is what makes the classic hic sound.
So what's flipping that switch in the first place? Well, the list of potential suspects is surprisingly long, and it ranges from things that are totally harmless to stuff that is genuinely life-threatening.
First, you've got to know that we basically split hiccups into 2 camps. You've got your acute hiccups. That's the normal kind that pretty much everyone gets. They're gone in less than 2 days. But if they keep going longer than that, they get reclassified as persistent or intractable, and that's when doctors really start looking for a deeper, hidden cause.
And this is where you really see the 2 sides of the coin. On one side, you have all the usual suspects, right? Eating too fast, fizzy drinks, maybe a little stress. But then look at the other side. A stroke, a heart attack. Even certain cancers can show up first as a case of hiccups that just won't quit. It's a pretty powerful reminder that the exact same reflex can mean 2 totally different things. Okay, so we know what they are and what can cause them, but now let's get to the question that everybody really wants to know. How do you make them stop? Let's look at everything from old folk remedies to actual modern medicine.
You've heard all of these for sure. Hold your breath, get a friend to scare you, drink water upside down. But here's the thing, they're not totally random. All of these home remedies are trying to do the same thing. Interrupt that hiccup reflex arc we talked about. Breathing into a bag raises the carbon dioxide in your blood, which can calm your diaphragm. Drinking cold water or pulling on your tongue, that stimulates a major nerve called the vagus nerve. It's all just different ways of trying to hit the reset button on that faulty circuit.
But what happens when a spoonful of sugar just doesn't cut it? Well, that's when doctors turn to actual medicine. And for those really stubborn, intractable cases, the research often points to one drug in particular, a muscle relaxant called baclofen, which is often considered the best tool in the toolbox for calming down that overactive reflex.
And that brings us to what is probably the most important part of this whole explainer. Look, most of the time hiccups are no big deal, but it is absolutely critical to know when they might be a warning sign for something much more serious. So let's talk red flags. So how do you know? When does that simple, annoying hic cross the line and become a real reason to pick up the phone and call your doctor?
Okay, here's your checklist. These are the big ones. If your hiccups last for more than 48 hours, that's the first major red flag. If they come with any other symptoms like chest pain, weird abdominal pain, sudden weight loss, or any neurological stuff like confusion or weakness, you need to get it checked out. At that point, it's not a glitch anymore. It could be your body's check engine light coming on.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought. We treat hiccups like a joke, right? A silly little biological misfire.
But maybe, just maybe, a hiccup isn't always a glitch. Maybe, sometimes it's a message, a signal from our own incredibly complex biology, just trying to get us to pay a little more attention.